Hello and welcome back to the Creator Spotlight podcast, the show focused on highlighting the very best of your favourite creators. On today's episode, I have a very special guest in the form of Mr. Tom Cowling, otherwise known as Tom/Drives on YouTube. Welcome, Tom.
Nice to be here, Alex. Nice to be here. Finally.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping to cover a lot of interesting stuff with you. You mentioned last time we spoke that you were a bit of a Mac nerd as well, so I'm
Yeah.
hoping that you'll have a few questions for me in that regard as well.
Yeah, sure. Now, for those who don't know much about you, so we make videos online on YouTube primarily, all about the world of classic cars and
Hmm.
Rovers and MG specifically. What I find quite interesting, I'm quite into that manufacturer as well. I've got a Rover myself.
Hmm.
For I think we're similar age, so what people might be quite surprised about is that people our age are interested in such old cars from a bygone era, like way before.
Yeah.
Well, we may have been either not born or got very very young at the time. So,
Mm.
what basically just give me an overview of what led to your interest in one, making videos, and then two, sort of what gave you that fascination with the Rover initially.
Well, I'll probably do the fascination with rovers first because that leads it straight into the videos.
Sure, that's fine.
So for me, I've loved these cars since I was about 8 years old. I got given a tiny Rover badge on the Rover 25, Rover 200. The earlier models, they had they had two badges on the rear post of the car, as well as
Yeah.
obviously the front and the rear one. I got given these tiny badges, as well as the big one. I was like, oh, this car has four badges. That's incredible. It's such a mundane thing to be excited about, but then that led me to browsing the web through a CRT on a Pentium 4 and reading all about rovers. One of the best websites, probably AR Online for that, Austin
Oh
Rover
yeah.
Online, as it was called at the time. Absolutely brilliant, run by Keith Adams. That was the thing that sort of cultivated my obsession with these cars. And then, of course, I found out a few weeks later that the company didn't actually exist anymore. After doing all that research, which was it just blew my mind that something like that could happen. And then, of course, it snowballed from there. And I ended up putting off getting a Rover 75 for many, many years. And then I eventually got one in 2019. And that led to me creating the videos that I make on the channel now. More because I sort of bought it because everybody was quite negative about Rovers at the time. And it wasn't really as much of a cool niche as it is now, if you
I
can
know.
call it that. It wasn't as popular as it is now. The car was sort of purchased by me as a bit of a. If someone said to me that they sort of saw it as a bit of a joke, the reason why I bought that car, but I actually do really like it. So I bought the Gold Rover 75 that appears in a lot of my videos, and I took it on a road trip around Europe, around 5,000 miles, and I just fell in love with it. I thought it was a fantastic, absolutely amazing car, and I looked on the internet. There was videos, yes, but there wasn't like a load of videos about them. I said, well, what if I just tell everybody how much I like this? And I've always been into presenting and creating, musician.
Oh right.
Of course, I've done a few things, other creative outlets as well. And I just thought, hey, I'll make a video on it, and the rest is history. I've sort of found a bit of a niche with the British classic cars and classic cars in general, mainly, of course, Rovers. And yeah, it's absolutely fantastic, and I think really getting stuck into the creative process is probably one of the best things about this.
Mm.
And what a lot of people is lost on a lot of people is, of course, social media is all about numbers, isn't it? It's all about engagement. It's about influence. It's about followers. It's about likes. It's about comments. It's about engagement. But one of the things that has sort of kept me away from focusing on that too much is the fact that I'm really quite interested in what I like, in what I do, and it is hard to, you know, not look at that and not hyper focus on that. And that's one of the things that I think has been to my benefit this past year or two is I've just gotten over that whole numbers game of staring at it. Of course, everybody wants their content to do well. Of course they do, but I think the main thing for me is just the love of what you do and getting really stuck into that creative process and coming out at the end of it and actually and watching what you've done is just fantastic. I just think it's amazing, and knowing that there's quite a lot of people engaged with what I do and what we do as a community is just fantastic. and it is truly brilliant.
I think some of the videos that of yours that really show that, some of the big long explainer videos where you have not
Mm.
necessarily you doing anything outside. It's you've got a load of like B-roll, and then you're just talking about something. You can tell by the way, one, it's produced, the way you're talking about it, and two, like the way it's just all brought together. You can tell that
Hmm.
it's really something you're interested in. You can watch some videos. There's like some YouTube channel, Apple Explained. They used to be very much. It's this one guy just talking about different Apple things, basically,
Yeah,
and it used to be very much. It was quite interesting, but now it feels like it's very. He's only making the videos because he has to, and it feels
yeah,
you can
yeah,
tell that when you're watching it. Whereas with yours, it's just you can tell that you're really really interested in the subject, and it comes through from watching it. So, and it
yeah, and
makes
that's
makes it
good.
really
Yeah,
interesting.
that's exactly what we want. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's it. It's trying to avoid that whole doing it because you have to, because it makes money, because
yeah, yeah,
you get ad revenue from it, because it makes you popular. It's just for the love of it, and that's what's brilliant. It's like with the MG Rover prototype thing. I didn't know that was going to do as well as it did. I just wanted to see some cars not sat outside,
yeah,
and I drove down to Longbridge off my own back. I just went down there just for the hell of it, because I was passionate about it, and I was like, these pieces of history are outside, and of course it went bananas, and here we are. Of course, with all these videos that they ended up being, I think it was the Daily Express ended up calling me a motoring expert.
yeah,
I think they've got the wrong dude.
yeah.
But yeah, it's crazy, and doing it for the love of it is the most rewarding thing to do, and that's what really keeps me going, and really does inspire me to keep making videos.
Yeah, actually, on a side tangent, I've never actually been to the gates where it is. I went there the other
Mm,
week. And I was surprised how empty it is. Just
it
you can
is.
see, you park just outside. You think, oh, there should be loads of buildings. It's just there's nothing there anymore. It's so
Yeah,
sad, but yeah,
it's sort of the bones of an industry, isn't it? It's
yeah,
completely demolished. That was the last proper, um, big mass production, British owned, British car manufacturer, and it's just been absolutely decimated. It's incredibly sad for obviously the car maker, and for us, the fans, the enthusiasts. But it's incredibly sad for the community it affected. And one of the people that really do inspire me from down in Longbridge, and since we're talking about that subject, is probably Gemma Cartwright, who's a real, she's one of the main
okay,
people. She's one of the main people that organises Pride of Longbridge, incredible car meet in Cofton Park that we go to every year. And she's truly one of the driving forces behind keeping all of this alive, and it's fantastic as well. And you sort of feed off that passion that these other people have.
mm,
It's really incredible. But yeah, back to what you said, it is incredibly sad. The only things that really remain are the Elephant House Conference Centre and the design studios at the back, and a few basically warehouses now
yeah, yeah,
been completely gutted, and it's incredibly sad. The flight shed, which was a historic building, that was demolished in around December 2011, I believe, and that
okay,
was where they actually built aircraft engines in World War Two, hence the
all
name.
right, yeah, yeah,
And then, of course, they developed a lot of their models in that building. So it's quite sad to see something so significant torn down. But
mm,
as many would say, as are the wheels of progress, I guess.
yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, we've jumped ahead a little bit. But yeah, you said what made you interested in that as a thing. What made you interested in Rover as a whole? I think what for me is my fascination with it is subconsciously I know that it's a company that was in this country. If you know what I mean.
Hmm.
There's basically nothing left in terms of our car industry. I think there's one like Morgan is relatively close to me. And
Hmm.
that's really what's left. And then the rest of them, yeah, some things are made here, but the ownership of the companies are elsewhere.
Yeah.
And that's I think in the back of my mind, I think that's what's made him fascinated. Oh, it's relatively close to me, the longest factory, and then you think, oh, something was made here, and you can have a look at what was done, if you know what I mean. I think
Hmm.
that's what it is for me. No one in my family had any of those vehicles. I just purchased a Rover 25 last year, the year before now.
Good
So yeah,
choice.
so yeah, yeah. It's interesting to see what happens with it all and what's left. So, I just wanted to talk about the concept car that you managed to help rescue, essentially. Just lead me down that process. How did you? I remember watching some videos from yours. You were explaining what the RDX 60. I never heard of it before you made your video, but what was? How did you find out it was still there? And two, what led you down the path of essentially helping to rescue it?
Yeah, so it was a few concept cars. The RDX 60 is obviously the main feature of it because that's an incredible what if. There was also the Tourer concept vehicle there, and the Rover, the sort of precursors, prototypes to the MGF, the PR1, 2 and 3, two of which were built by Reliant. And then there was the MG TFGT, and I believe there should be one more on that list, but no, that's correct. That's all of them. Yeah, so that's all of them there. Taking you down that story, basically what happened is somebody posted a picture on one of the groups, on one of the British Leyland enthusiast groups, and I got that picture sent to me. It was an incredibly grainy picture, and it's just a picture of just the cars, as if it's a screenshot from a video, and it was a screenshot from a video. And after that, I just sort of wondered about them because previously, in about January 2023, I made a video called MG Rover, the Lost Prototypes and Survivors, which, through the research of that, I couldn't account for the cars. The last known location was at Longbridge in 2019. So seeing these outside in 2023 in August was a real breakthrough and sort of kick-started it all again. So I saw that. I then made this silly Google Earth video where I sort of sat there on Google Earth trying to work out where everything was and based on these pictures and track the car's movements. And it turned out it was largely correct. So using that knowledge, one of the people that watched me sent me a picture through the fence of what is the TCV with the other cars all boxed in. So I was like, oh, this is real. They're actually here. So I then drove down to Longbridge and shouted outside of a fence for a bit, made a video on it, and posted it. So I thought, oh yeah, it's just gonna do what it's gonna do, isn't it? People will be outraged, and as the culture is, they'll forget about it and we'll move on. But it wasn't like that, and it's a real credit to the community of Rover enthusiasts, British car enthusiasts, that it wasn't simply just let go. And then what happened is BBC West Midlands then slid into my DMs on Instagram, and I was like, oh damn, I'm actually getting we were actually getting some traction here. And then they did an interview with me on radio, and then they used that in, I think it was 2 live broadcasts on BBC West Midlands, and then 2 runs of the story on the radio, and then of course on their website as well, and on the social media channels. And then it gained a lot of traction to the point where people were calling MG, people were calling the British Motor Museum, and it went a bit bonkers. Wow. After that, I got contacted by, I think it was it Classic Car Magazine. Okay. I did an interview with them about it, and it was just really to raise awareness. And one brilliant soul thought about something, that most campaigns would have, which is a petition. Of course, I'm not smart enough to think of that as part of a campaign that I'm supposedly running. So, somebody created a change.org petition, and it sort of went a bit bananas. After that, it sort of all fell silent for a bit. The British Motor Museum said, yeah, we're going to take the cars on. And this is, of course, was happening before me. So There was like a bit of a battle for them, but it had all fallen a bit silent, and they were sort of just, trudging through, trying to get them to restart it. But I think, and as they attributed it to the community effort that, of course, was spawned from that series of videos, that was the kick they needed, the MG UK team, to actually, sign on the dotted line and get the cars on loan to the British Motor Museum. So after that, it really was just radio silence. And I kind of felt like we'd all been abandoned a little bit, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So it was like, oh, well, we've done all this, and of course the efforts before me, and every effort from the person taking the video to the person going and walking and taking a photo, every single effort is just worth just as much as the other. But then all of a sudden, I think I actually no, I actually called the British Motor Museum and I said, "Can we have like an update, please?" Because they're all very hush hush. They're all very, because they're a massive trust, and you'd expect them to be like that. They're professionals. They're not a 25-year-old screaming on the internet like me. So I waited and waited, and then they sent me an email inviting me to come down. They said, "Look, we've got them all here." I was like, "Holy, that is incredible!" So they invited me down. The RDX 60, which is one of the cars that I looked at years and years ago when I was about 11 years old, not in person but on the internet, was there, and they took it off the trailer in front of me. We pushed it in, but there was a dolly on the front because obviously the car was seized, and it was absolutely amazing. They just let me have free reign of it, and it was the first ever time anybody had been that in depth into it, which was amazing. A real exclusive bit of content, and those guys at the British Motor Museum are really incredible. They're really passionate about what they do, and they're just fantastic people to work with.
Are they on show yet for the public, or are they still prepping them?
They're still prepping them at the moment.
Okay.
The RDX 60, they've cleaned the interior up and everything and started putting it back together. The other ones, though, they're sort of doing it as a revolt, like one in, one out, one in, one out, because the amount of workload they've got in there. I mean, when I went into their workshop, it was incredible the amount of cars they had. There's so many cars and so many incredibly rare cars, like the TWR XJ, I think it was a XJR, I think it was, or an XK, I can't remember. The Salute, the Coupe, but yeah, they had some real treats in there. It was amazing.
Yeah, I do enjoy that. It's not too far from me. I do enjoy going there every now and again. There's always something. They've got that platform inside. There's always something different on that top section. So yeah,
it's very weird because I'd never been.
Oh really?
No, I've never been. So the first time I ever went there was there were like free reign. They were like, "Oh yeah, you can go." They walked me around. I think it was Amy and Mark, two of the staff members, and they were like, "Yeah, you can." I was like, "Oh, can we look at the CCV?" And they're like, "Yeah, you can look at the CCV." And I'm like, "Can we go inside it?" And they're like, "Yeah, I'll open it, but you can't sit in it." I was like, "Oh, damn it!" I was like, "I'm not going to push my luck anymore." But it was amazing. But I've never been, so it was a proper night at the museum sort of experience, but during the day, and cars weren't coming to life. It was incredible. It was really, really good.
Yeah, it's really good what they do. It's good that they're sort of preserving some of the motor industry we used to have, and just for people who have never really heard of it before and coming to go and see them or whatever, or just fans of MG Rovers. So it's really, really good. It's a credit to you as well for sorting that out and sort of making some sort of noise about it, because I wonder what would have happened if you hadn't. Like, they may have just been crushed or...
That's it. They could have just disappeared into the background again and sat in Longbridge until eventually, they knocked the rest of it down and then decided, this is it. We don't want them here. And get rid of them. Yeah. Circumstances can change, and luckily the circumstances were correct. Everything lined up perfectly.
Yeah, definitely. We touched on sort of the British car industry as a whole. I mean, I mentioned we do make some stuff. So obviously, some Jaguar stuff's made here, some Range Rover stuff's made here. And I went to the just recently actually. I went to the Cowling factory. Obviously that was where the Rover 75 was made. That's now the Mini factory. That was quite interesting. But as I mentioned, like, there's only one or two little companies which are still making things here properly, if you know what I mean. And that sort of leads me into the process of what happened when Rover went bust initially in 2004, and then also what you think that MG are doing in 2024. I know it's a very, very different company than what it used to be. It's basically just the name of it. But yeah, I just wanted to see what you thought about that.
Thoughts about what MG's doing now, or
what Rover going bust as a whole, and then the transition into becoming what it was now, because it's quite interesting, that story of how it became what it is. I guess not many people know what happened really with that whole process.
Yeah, so Rover going bust in 2005 was just an inevitability. It just was bound to happen. When BMW split Rover Group up, taking Land Rover Mini, the two real moneymakers there, and the missteps of the Rover brand along the way, because you've got to think it was in the 60s in its height with the P6, it was very cool Britannia, it was very It was very sleek. It was very stylish. It was very middle class. And the brand sort of degraded, classes aside and all that sort of stuff. Um, the badge being put on things like the Rover 200. As much as we love these cars, I believe they should have been badged as Austins. The Rover 200, the SD3. I mean, you've got the SD1. The build quality woes on that were the first big misstep, because that was a real. It was almost like, I mean, I'm not sure if you play games. Have you ever played Cyberpunk 2077?
I have not. No, no.
No, no. If you, easiest way to explain it is that car was incredibly hyped up. It was car of the year in 1977, and it flopped because of the awful build quality due to the jobs for life culture at British Leyland at the time. That a lot of them weren't really that bothered, and the management was disconnected. It was just a lot of turmoil, and then of course you've got the brand degradation of that. Unreliable cars, being terrible, Rover badge on them. We don't like Rover. Then you've got it being stuck on the 216, 213 SD3, which was a tiny compact car, further degrading the brand. And then the final nail for the Rover brand in the coffin was the Rover 100, or the Rover Metro in the late 90s, that had that awful crash test, and ended up being taken off sale straight afterwards. So the Rover brand had degraded. And then by the time, of course, Rover Group was split up, the Gaydon studio, the test track, all of the development and the staff were lost. They were given to Land Rover on BMW's side. So MG Rover really had nothing in a way of developing new models. So they were basically stuck from the get-go. Now the money that they were given by BMW wasn't invested wisely. They went racing with it first, and it was one of those things. The Phoenix 4, the people that took over, and Kevin Howe, the CEO at the time, very controversial bunch of people. But the one thing you can say about them, to their credit at least, is it kind of kept that area of the Midlands in employment for the best part of 5 years. But that's a whole thing in itself. But as for what MG is doing now, it doesn't really sort of jive with me. It's a lot. It's just a lot of badge engineering. And these cars would have been SAIC. MG is just a name at this point.
Yep.
If they can recover the brand values and recover the brand with the Cyberster or whatever it's called, who knows?
Yeah,
but
definitely.
At the minute, it's just a name that they've stapled to some EVs, which is fine, but that doesn't cut it with enthusiasts. It will do with the general populace, because everybody likes cheap stuff and everybody likes cheap, good stuff, and the cars aren't particularly bad.
Yeah, definitely. Just jumping back to when the Rover 200 came out, I remember I probably watched it for the first time. Yeah, I think you know what I'm going to talk about, but the BBC documentary, like a 6-part, they labeled it as a comedy, which is quite funny. I didn't just realise that it was like when Rover met me. When Rover met BMW, I watched it the first time probably a year or two ago, and I watched it again, and I realised the other week, I was like, oh, it's actually, I read this great piece from the Intercaller, I think. They actually labelled the whole, and when you watch it back, knowing that it went to be a comedy, then you sort of, then you sort of get, the BBC was sort of making fun of what they were doing at the time. But I found that really interesting, that even before the company sort of being shoved aside, that there was some actual footage captured of different things that the company was doing. I found that quite interesting. Watched it for the first time, but
it was all to do with the 75 at the time, wasn't it?
Yeah,
and they were hoping that BMW would be fully behind that, but the 75 was sabotaged on launch. The BMW chairman at the time basically just, it's incredible. It's an incredible it's an incredible blunder. You have a car company that you're instrumental in acquiring. Of course, there's some delays with production and development of a new car, as there always is. And then you completely lampoon it at the last minute, just before its launch, getting rid of the confidence in the brand that was growing at that point, and then getting rid of potential customers. And there was also a few other things at the time, like they didn't launch the classic Rover 75 straight away, which was the fleet slash volume car of the
Hmm.
range. So it was quite it was quite an interesting time, really.
Yeah, definitely. At the very start of the episode, we sort of mentioned that we both got sort of a Mac fascination as well. I noticed on your channel, the
Hmm.
very first videos you started making were about the iBooks and about those. So what what led to the? So you started uploading some videos about tech essentially, and then you sort of moved
Yeah.
into what made you do the tech videos to start with?
Yeah, so I was like self-employed basically at one time, and that was my job. So I was
Yeah.
traveling the country getting all these Macs and refurbishing them. I've always been into Macs. I've always been into computers. Computers is my main job. So I used to travel the country getting these Macs, and I thought, this is way before. If you do you watch a lot of tech YouTubers like is it Luke Mayani or
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
something?
He's really good.
He
Yeah.
like he would do like I got 10 MacBook Airs. Let's see if we can fix them.
Yeah.
It was an earlier version of that because in one of the videos I think I had something like 20 iBook G3 clamshells.
Oh,
You
really?
could have just got a completely bonkers amount of stuff, and I just thought it was fascinating. So I was like, I'd kind of like to just upload these, just me talking about them. But with that, the issue is when you turn your hobby into a job and you're not prepared to um, do that separation is you get burned out of the hobby quite quick, and that's sort
Oh,
of
yeah.
where I ended up and why I ended up stopping. Those videos were more just for the videos were just more to document how funny it was at the time that I just got all this stuff, and it was really really epic, and people really enjoyed it. But the move to the car videos was just something I always wanted to do. Those
Yeah.
videos were sort of like a sundry item to the various posts and stuff I'd make in like low end Mac and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, that's
Fair
where
enough.
that's how I ended up where I am now.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, yeah. As I said, at the very start of the episode, some of the videos that you've produced are really, really well done. And I think what
Mm.
people will tend to not see is if let's say they haven't produced anything themselves, how long some of that stuff must takes, like scripting and getting all the research done. And then once you've done that and filmed it, and then you got to, if you're talking about something, you got to get all the screenshots in and put them all at the right time. I think people like 25-minute video could take you hours and hours,
Yeah,
and I think people don't realize that sometimes when they watch it for like 5 minutes and say, "Oh, you got this wrong," and then that was about it, and they go, "Oh, okay." Like,
yeah. It takes ages, and
yeah,
you've
it
got to
does.
make sure you get it right because people do take what you say quite seriously.
Oh
And
yeah,
the last thing I'd want is to sit there and talk about, for example, the Rover Triumph Straight Six that I talked about in the last video. The last thing I want to do is add to the further to what's it called to the mystery of it by getting loads of stuff wrong,
yeah, yeah,
if that makes sense. So
that makes
yeah,
sense.
there's a lot of research that goes into it, editing, scripting, etc., etc. Occasionally, I do get things wrong, like oh, I simply won't. I think it was the Rover P6. It has like I think it's called like Didion suspension.
Okay,
That's how you just that's what it's called. And I just didn't want to pronounce it because I didn't want to go into this like a random French accent and then switch back to me.
yeah,
So I just decided, I'm just going to call it Didion suspension, which is correct in the English pronunciation. And I got absolutely destroyed for it. I loved it. It was funny.
well, yeah,
But the rest of the video was fantastic, and there is a lot of that, and you've got to deal with that as part of your exposure on the internet, I guess.
yeah. It's funny how because this podcast goes out on the Interface podcast channel, and I've got another channel called the Interface Cars. So I do that as well. I
Mm,
do car reviews of brand new cars and stuff. And if I get
mm,
one little thing wrong, I think I can't remember what it was. I got one little thing wrong, and there was like 3 comments about that one thing. I was like, well, I mentioned that probably halfway through for like a very split second. I just had to go back and remove it because it's just I can't have that in there. And
yeah,
luckily, you can do
yeah.
that with YouTube. So yeah, it's crazy how people watch that and then they'll even if like 99% of it's really good, and then they'll look at the 1% and think, oh, I don't know,
Yeah, a
really
lot of
annoying
people do
sometimes.
hyper focus on it, and it's that this it's within it. With some things you get an older audience, if that makes sense. So your
Yep.
demographic of your audience is different, and they're the guys and girls and everything that watched like BBC or watched Thames or watched ITV and watched all these really highly produced things, and it's almost as if they think that YouTube is the same. If that makes sense, it's not amateur. To a certain degree, you've got to have professionalism, which we both do. But there is an amateur nature about it, and that one makes it what it is, which is what makes it so special. And two, we've got basically no budget, so
Yeah.
here we are, and we sort of do it off, you know, for the love of it. And
Yeah.
eventually, yes, it does turn into profit. Of course, it does. It turns into ad revenue. It turns into whatever it turns into. But yeah, no, I do agree with you. There is a lot of people do hyper focus, but it's having that confidence in your work that even if you accidentally go edit you breathing in out, for example, like I did today. Luckily I had time to go back and edit that, but it's having that confidence that the rest of it, for me anyway, is the rest of it is on its own. That what doesn't take away from it. And I think in your case as well, the rest of the video is good. So that one tiny thing, and these people hyper focusing on
Yeah.
it, doesn't take away from the overall product, does it? But of course, it is hard to look past that, and that's one of the things that a lot of people just have to struggle with, and same with me.
Yeah. One thing I find is if you can, I get a second person to look at it and just watch it back. So
Yeah,
thankfully my girlfriend watches my videos back through before I upload them and says, well, you got this wrong and this wrong. Oh, you look
yeah,
stupid there. So it's quite useful
yeah.
having
It's
someone
nice
watch
to
it back.
have that. It's nice to have that sort of second opinion on it. I tend to watch them a few times before I upload them,
Yeah.
and then once it's uploaded, I then watch them again.
Yeah.
And then obviously I get my partner to watch them as well because she just goes through them and she's incredibly honest about it all,
Yeah.
as it sounds like your partner is as
Yeah.
well. And that's really, really welcomed because
Yeah.
it helps making it what it is at
Yeah.
the end product, a bit more a bit more polished and a bit more refined, and that's good for us and good for the viewer.
Yeah, 100%. And I find once it's live, I start to notice the issues. So when I do a lot of writing for the interface and also my day job as well, and I find once I hit publish, then I read it back through. It's like, oh, I've noticed like 10 different areas. I got to go back and fix it. So it's always when it goes live that you notice the problems, which
Yeah,
is quite funny.
yeah,
So yeah. Just wrapping up a little bit. Last thing I want to get to is you've been producing videos on YouTube for about 4 years now, I think.
yeah.
What's the few things or the biggest thing that you've found that you'd like to pass on to someone else? Have you got any advice for anyone looking to either make videos about anything really, or even if it's about cars? Like, what's the thing that you've found that you'd like to pass on to someone?
Easy.
Yeah.
Don't focus on the numbers. Don't
Yeah.
sit there looking at intensely viewing the viewer count. Don't sit there looking at the subscribers as a measure of yourself or your of how good your stuff is. It'll come good in the end, and that's a story that is true with 99% of creators, and is true with myself as well. And within that 99%, at the start, just I'd create something really that I thought was brilliant, and then not many people would watch it, and I would sit there and go, well, maybe this is because I'm terrible at what I do, but it just wasn't. It's not about that.
No.
It's about being confident in that you've put something out there and taking pride in that, in the creation of it,
Mm-hmm.
rather than taking. And of course, we all, like I said at the start, we all want views, we all want subscribers, we all want likes, we all want comments. But it is really about just not focusing on the numbers, because that can lead you to an incredible burnout when something's out of your control and you're sitting there watching it so intently. It just isn't healthy. It
No.
really isn't. And I found myself in that situation. I'm sure a lot of other people have. So that's
Oh
the
yeah.
one thing I would say is focus on the craft and focus on enjoying what you do, and don't focus on the numbers, because that'll come in time.
Yeah, I think that's really good. I think when I started uploading videos more regularly last year, I was focused on how many views I were getting and different things, and it probably doesn't matter to start with, as you said. Just make something good, and in theory, people will come to the watering hole. So
That's it.
yeah, it's really good. And as I mentioned, the focus and the drive that you've got behind your videos, for me, it definitely comes through in watching them. They're really engaging to watch, so it's really good. That's going to do it for this episode. Thank you so much, Tom. As I said, we had a long time coming. I think we first emailed in April last year, I think,
Yes,
for coming on the episode. But it's really good to get on the show. Yeah. Really, really good. Where can people find you online if they want to learn more about what you make and do?
Instagram, Tom is driving cars, because I am. And YouTube is Tom/drives. I'll just type in Tom Drives. Leave the slashes out. It's just because it looks cool. And yeah, that's where you can follow me. They're my two main social media channels.
Fantastic. You can find the interface at theinterface.uk. There's news and car reviews and different things on there. Thanks everyone for joining us on this podcast, or watching or listening. And we'll see you again next time.